Good evening, everyone, again. Welcome to Chaa with Roma. Tonight, we are joined by Will Harris on our episode called Sustaining the Spark. We'll be talking about sustaining creativity, especially after a debut collection. To start, each of us will read a poem from our debut collection that I think we're particularly proud of. And then we'll look into conversation about what it means to keep writing after that first wave of excitement and first wave of rush. I hope that tonight's episode will explore how we continue to grow, how we stay close to the work, and of course, how we nurture our creative and our reflective practice especially through the quieter seasons that follow a debut. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce our guest, of course, the one and only Will Harris. Will Harris was born in London. He is the author of the poetry books Rendang and Brother Poem, which just came out in a couple of years ago in 2023. They are both published by Granta, and he's also the author of the essay Mixed Race Superman with Peninsula in 2018. He won the Forward Prize for Best First Collection and has been shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Prize. He co-translated Habib Tengor's Consolatio with Poetry Translation Center with Delaina Haslam in 2022, and he co-facilitates the South Bank Center's New Poets Collective with Vanessa Kisule. Siblings, a conversation between Jay Bernard, Merjin Chan, and Nisha Ramaya was published by Monitor Books in 2024. Will has held fellowships at the University of Manchester and at Columbia University's Institute for Ideas and Imagination in Paris. He is currently working on a project about the care sector and is a RLF Fellow in the Department of Allied Health at London South Bank University. Everybody, please, let's welcome Will Harris. Will, have a good evening. How are you?
I'm, yeah, I'm well, actually. Yeah, I feel like everyone is either ill or, about to succumb to illness, and I actually feel fine. So,
It's that
grateful.
time of the year.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming to Chat with Roma. And for those who are ill and can't join us tonight, do not worry. This is being recorded, and you will watch us sometime soon on our YouTube channel. Well, I'm wondering if you can you can read a poem to start, something from your debut collection, Rendang, something that you felt that you've always been proud of to begin with.
Mm. And then you're going to read something that
Yes.
you feel the same about. Okay, great. Um, so Roman just asked me to do this before we came on air, and I think pride is actually an emotion I struggle with. So um, I'm going to read something yeah, that I do still like from my first book, but I haven't really read it for a long time. Um, but I think I like it because it went through a long gestation period, and then the final version felt just, when you kind of come upon something like a kind of turning all the bits of a Rubik's Cube and you feel like, it's just like arrived at a form which is completely its own and separate from this incredibly complicated gestation. And it's called Scene Change. Um, it's in these two parts. The first part, I would never have introduced it like this at the time, but the first part is basically about being depressed at university. And the second part is about um, a sort of dream of visiting family in Indonesia. Scene change. A row of Georgian houses slopes down to a meadow filled with pretty little meadow flowers, where you could forget these rolling barrows started life as stacks of corpses, piled high with earth and stone that rotted back into the land, and only after several generations' growth grew to resemble what you might call scenic. Built by the Dutch in the century before last, I climb the high steps of the bell tower, and taking in my hands the tongue, the clapper, ring too slowly at first, aware of my imposture, and then too quickly in a bid to compensate, as it dings hollow across the square and down across the car-polluted outskirts of the colony. That's it.
Thank you, Will. Thank you. Wow, that's really almost very cinematic. I could really see the setting, and your poem always has that effect. And I'd like to talk to you more about it a bit later. The effect of it's so grounded, but it's so resonant, and you'd like to go back to it often, long after you've read it. I'll read a poem from Anti-Medic for Homesickness, but I won't read the whole poem because I guess the poem that I mean, to be fair, I'm proud of, and you probably are proud as well of all your poems, um, Will. But I think the poem that I guess I owe so much to is Names, because that's the poem that got me the Poetry in London Clore Prize, and it really opened doors for me, especially as a new poet at the time. So I'll just read a few lines from it. Names. We are nameless, and all names are ours. Emanuela Caba. My mother's name is Rosanna, but when she left, I had other mothers: Rowena, Jimboy, Alma. I was named after the first syllables of my parents. I will always have them with me. My mother says not all names have meaning. Riverside, Manila, London, Corba. And someday I will forget all the commands I did not heed, like the time I did not spin the plate clockwise before my father left for work, even if it would deliver him from accidents. Not all destinations are found in the junctions of your palm lines. Say better life, say better life. And God knows I am repenting. Say Airbus something, say one way ticket, keep following the sunset. Clouds are the closest things to my mother. Say United Kingdom, say the Queen, NHS. Does winter always mean? Listen, can you hear it? The loneliness of stretchers along A&E corridors. And the strongest part of me is the scar I hide underneath my French. My mother hides in the staff toilet to make long distance calls. I'll stop there. Well, thank you for sharing a poem. Let's talk a bit about the experience of writing and publishing your debut and how your perspective on your book, on your poems has evolved. I really want to ask you, looking back, what like releasing your debut collection, and any unexpected challenges of being a debut poet at that time, 5 years ago?
Um, it actually cut out slightly at the beginning. You were saying, what was it? Were you saying, what was it like releasing a debut collection? What were the challenges?
Yeah, so can you share a little bit about the excitement of being a debutant 5 years ago, the clamor maybe, or any unexpected
Mhm.
challenges of being a debut poet?
Well, okay. Um, there's a lot in that. When did your book come out again? When did it
I
exactly
think it
come
was
out?
like July 2020. I'm sure it's in the middle of
Okay.
pandemic. I'm sure
Well,
it's
yeah.
July. I just
So I was going to
can't.
say, and mine came out in February 2020. So when I think about the challenges of it coming out, it's hard not to bring in the context of uh, COVID,
Mm,
which weirdly I feel like isn't really talked about that much in some ways. It's almost in that like blind spot in the recent past where it's both too big and too recent to have fully processed. Anyway,
mm,
but maybe we can get on to that, um, how COVID affected it or how that changed poetry, which maybe it did. But I, what was it like? I mean, it felt like I'd be really interested to hear everyone else's thoughts. By the time it happened, it felt like it had been going to happen for a very long time. You know, the process is feels so like excruciatingly slow, especially for your first book, I think. You know, when I signed the deal and I found out it was going to be like 2 years until the book came out, or at least two calendar years away. Maybe it wasn't exactly 2 years. You know, it was going to be 2020. I just couldn't believe it. It felt like a sci-fi date. And I felt like I'd been writing these poems already for years and years. And I was like, oh my God, I have to live with them for even longer. And I can't just get them out. And so there was a sense of maybe just wanting the release of these
mm,
poems being out there, wanting it to be, yeah, wanting to be slightly free of something. And that's probably also linked to the pressure that comes with a debut, which is it's not unlike, you know, it's different to any other thing you ever really publish because there's such a strange amount of scrutiny and attention on it, even if that is just internally felt. And my, okay, yeah, there are multiple sides to my answer to this. Um, and I don't want to seem like a downer, but basically in the context of what I said, the experience very soon after publishing was of a sort of anticlimax because it had been so long coming, and also of a sense of loss. Like I really remember vividly holding my book for the first time and thinking, um, you know, this is it, as in the sense of like, oh my God, it's so like small and I don't know. I mean, I know it's kind of the opposite of those reveals people do where they film themselves opening the box and they're like, oh my God, it's amazing.
mm,
I had the opposite. I mean, I think the book looks amazing. I'm really like, and actually, I think it looks much better now. But at the time when I first saw it, I was like, is this it? Because in my head, it represented this thing which the physical object could never um, fulfill. So when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is it. And also it represented the loss of the potential I felt because I had this book had been living inside of me for so long and suddenly it was a real thing and I couldn't change it. And I realized suddenly like I'd given something away, which I hadn't realized I was giving away. I thought that I was choosing this, but I also had given something away, which was the potential that it represented. And that was something which really haunted me, particularly because then I was lucky enough to do a few events and then the pandemic happened and suddenly I was just in, you know, a world of silence. I was cat sitting at the time by myself and the owners were of the house were and the cat were in Lebanon. It was a Lebanese family and they were stranded there. So I was just with this cat and I was just suddenly, you know, and that I think further enhance this sense of alienation I felt on publishing. It was suddenly like I'd split myself off, and this practice of writing, which was so physical and much a part of me, was suddenly now represented by this object that was traveling out into the world, and I didn't feel like it was me. And it was an alien. Yeah, it felt alienating and a little bit and yeah, distressing. And I remember at the time I tried to distinguish them. Like again, I'm probably like giving too much or like going into this in too much detail, but I'll just end on this point that one thing that was important to me was to try and distinguish between writing and publishing. And I think I hadn't fully grasped that distinction until I published that those were two different things. That,
Mm,
you know, the practice that you create and nurture as a writer, you know, both privately, maybe with, you know, the people you share work with, is something separate from these um, market driven cycles of and you know commerce driven incentives of publishing. And publishing is all, you know, is like linear. It's all about, you know, targets. It's all about, you know, these little milestones and like publishing this and moving on to the next thing and this and that. And whereas writing is like this, it's all like circular and it's full of zigzags and silences and confusion. And I think separating those two things in my head became quite an important way of staying sane. Um,
mm.
okay, sorry, I was just kind of unloaded. What about you?
No,
That
no,
was
that's a very
no, I was
there's
worried
a
I would
lot
do
to
this. I was worried I'd just say everything all at once. Um, um,
Can you hear me, Will?
yes, I can now. Was
I'm
was
not
I
sure if it
frozen?
was me or me or you.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
No, I was just gonna say that there's of course there's a lot to unpack from what you said, but I could really relate to what you're saying about the feeling of public after publishing. It's almost an anticlimax, and there's a sense of loss, and I think it's a very natural reaction. And maybe at that time, as a debut, I didn't feel it as that as well. I felt, I guess, I felt it as like you said, as it my process of writing would still continue, like it's like this, whereas publishing and post publication is very linear and timelined. And I think it's interesting because from my perspective, when I look at maybe not just you but any debut, um sometimes as a reader or as a viewer, we only see the good things, like, oh, your book has been shortlisted to this, or people posting your book on Instagram. Whereas on the other side of that, the author is actually having this mixed emotions, like you mentioned a while ago. It was actually quite distressing um, for you. If there's a vivid memory that you can perhaps see even now, both triumphant and both, and maybe either one triumphant and one distressing, would you mind to share it with us and maybe talk a little bit more about it?
Well, okay, I can do. Again, it's hard to separate how I was feeling, and I'd be interested again maybe in the when we ask other people about their feelings and thoughts about any other debut authors and how they felt. I don't know if I can separate what I was feeling from the pandemic and
Mm,
and that intensifying everything. I felt like it made me feel very raw, even though the attention the book was getting, in a way, because it was happening all online and I didn't have to go to any events. It should have felt like I was insulated against it, but somehow it actually felt like the opposite because in that pandemic brain state, the outside and inside world were merged. But the more attention the book got, which I know I should have been incredibly grateful for, the more it actually made me feel very panicky. So I
mm,
actually remember you asked for a specific moment of, of triumph. When I found out that I'd been shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Prize, I actually almost had a panic attack. because I was it's like I was like it was almost like it was like an anxiety dream where something had gone too far, like this, like I felt like a kind of con artist. I was like, this isn't right, this isn't about the book. You guys have just it's like a joke that's like, you know, gotten like out of hand. Um, it was, yeah, it was making me feel very, very weird,
Mm,
very distant from myself. I developed when a book, I mean, so I've only really had it with Rendang, of the
mm,
things I published. When a book is successful in that particular way, it can feel like people aren't even reading you, they're reading the idea of you. And
mm,
and that is very yeah, that's not very nice, actually.
mm,
Like I only experienced a sliver of what that's like, and I really didn't like it. I'd read things that people said about me that were ostensibly good. They were nice things, but they were inaccurate things. And actually having people
mm,
say inaccurate but nice things about you, again, it makes you feel mad. It's like it's you're just misrepresenting me, and then you start to circle back on yourself and you think, have I misrepresented myself again? What have I done? What have I let out into the
mm,
world? What, like genie have I released in my desire for something that I didn't even know what it was that yeah, what exactly I wanted. So yeah, I think my experience, it was that I think writers, I wanted as a writer to be read, I guess.
mm,
And I wanted the opportunity to write again. And sometimes the things that you see, you're talking about the social media side, I actually don't, those are the antithesis of writing,
mm.
the awards and all of that other stuff, because they're things that happen to the external part of you, not the part which is yeah, that can kill the quiet and doubtful part. But yeah, what about you? What was a moment for you? Sorry, I feel like you should give a
No, I
counterpoint now.
really, I, no, I really,
You need to give a different perspective, because I try not to
you
talk
know
about this
what?
stuff too much, because again, I feel like
No, Will, I really
I'm
appreciate you
complaining.
saying that and being very honest to me and also to our viewers. And while you're telling us your experiences, at the back of my head, I was laughing because I feel exactly the same, but in a different, in a different scenario, and probably because I was this young debut debut poet, I came from, I think before I signed with Chatham, I was very lucky in a way that I kept winning. Suddenly, I kept winning prizes like Creative Future Writers Award in 2017, and then Manchester Poetry Prize, and then the Poetry London. And that's how Chatham found out about me. Actually, Liz very high. She was the one who showed the editor my poem. And so, as a debut poet, I was like, oh, maybe I was really doing something good here. Maybe my poems are powerful. So when you're saying about the T.S. Eliot, and you say it's, I think the word that you use is it's a joke. When you found out that, um, did you mention joke or something that
Oh
was
yeah, no,
something
I said for me it felt like it was a joke that had gone too far, my book, or like some kind of
that
yeah,
your
like
book was
it was my
that?
feeling that I was some sort of small
So my
time con
feeling
artist, and it suddenly had gone mainstream and it was spiraling beyond my control.
So my feeling will, and I guess this is because I'm very appreciative of you opening up, and I'd really like to open up as well. At that time, I remember um, looking. I'm just not sure if it's T.S. Eliot or one of the big prizes like Forward or T.S. Eliot, and I look at, I'm I'm not on it. It's a joke. Why am I not? So coming from that perspective that, oh, my poem could be good because like they won prizes before. Like these poems are like all anonymous and they all come together. And so when I, from my side of perspective, I think I was a little bit heartbroken at that time as well. That, oh, this is a joke. How come I wasn't even shortlisted to
Mm,
this? So my perspective was that, but it's so interesting how you said sometimes you felt like they're not reading the work, but the idea of you. And I guess I can relate to that, but in a way that there was a question in my head at that time that did was my book really read, or was
mm,
it just the idea of me who this Romulan Ante is that's read? So in a way, that was my perspective at the time, and I guess I'm saying this because now that we're talking about this, now it made me realize that actually, whatever we feel, or however our book is taken by the world, or maybe the critics, or maybe whatever the establishments or the organizations, it really depends. It's still natural to to question and to have a
mm.
lot of question. And yes,
Yeah.
sorry, go on.
No, no,
You
no. I
go.
know, and what you're saying also brings up another thing for me, which is the difference between a poem and a book, and
Mm,
how, yeah, I mean, because poetry books are an unusual thing, I think. Um, and maybe we shouldn't say that, but sometimes I do really wonder whether, whether the book is the best form for poems, for poetry. Some projects really suit a book very well, but sometimes they don't. And sometimes poems, I mean, the exciting thing about poetry is that a poem can live this amazing life, an individual poem. It
mm,
can like travel through like time and into different people's in languages and to different people's um, heads in different ways. But does a book of poems doesn't really travel in the same way. I mean, and I know in my experience of poetry books that I can like live alongside it for a long time and dip in and out and like read it. I don't read it from front to. I very rarely read a poetry book from beginning to end, basically. So I know that when people tell me that they love my book. I know that they won't have read the whole thing, or they won't have,
mm,
or they definitely won't have like sat with it, and then nobody will know it in the way that you as the writer know it, which knows it, which is strange. It's not like a novel, um, or even a book of short stories. That's probably a bit more similar.
mm.
Um, yeah, no, that was just one reflection.
I think I think you're definitely right in a way that individual poems leave differently and last differently um, than a book. At the same time, I'm wondering when people tell us that they love our book. I guess it's also given that probably they probably didn't really read the whole book and were just touched by one or two or a few poems from there, and from then they get to love a book. I was actually talking to my husband about um, poetry books and that journey a few weeks ago now, and I was telling him, I was telling Surya that I realized that there were times when I was really proud of my poetry book, especially my debut, and then there were times when I felt like, I'm not so sure about it, and then it almost like fluctuates my feelings about it, especially after my debut when I tried different things, obviously second collection and exploring, expanding things. And I wonder if you have if you feel ever if you feel that way as well after your debut. Did you ever feel like, actually, maybe after your debut, did you ever feel like giving up at all, like on your writing? And if so, at what point, when, and how did you find How did you find the strength to keep going?
Um, I felt I didn't feel that actually at the time. I have felt that more since my second book. That's when I felt like
Right.
was after finishing my second book. That's when I felt like giving up the most. That's when I started working in care homes, and I just was trying to. Yeah, I felt like, and that's when I stopped writing poems as much as often, and I sort of had to step back because one response to my first book was that I felt a lot like what you were saying. I felt a lot of shame about my poems. I felt like they weren't good, and I felt that embarrassed. I felt embarrassed that people were reading them. So, and also because it was the pandemic and I had a lot of time on my hands, I just wrote a lot, and that's when I wrote most of my second book.
Mm.
Uh, and I also read a lot. I read obsessively. I was like, oh God, because I just, it's a really stupid way to approach a book, but I was like, oh, I haven't, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I didn't read enough of
Right.
these people. It was,
Mm,
it was insufficiently like political. The language was not as kind of like dense
mm.
as like interesting as it could be. I wasn't doing enough with meter. I wasn't doing any, I was like all of these things. I was like so the second book came entirely out of shame from the first book and came quite
Right.
soon after. And then, and I'm now still sort of in this weird position where I feel like there was I often think in terms of energy cycles. Like there was a certain energy cycle that those two books represented that exhausted itself,
Mm,
or like sealed itself. And now I'm still waiting for another um,
mm,
kind of burst of energy from somewhere, at least to write poetry. I've been writing working on another project. But yeah, for
mm.
poems at least. Yeah, I don't. Did your second book have the same relationship, or what was the relationship between your second book and the first,
Well, you know what,
and
Will?
writing after the first book?
I'm like convinced that almost the not formula, but almost the trajectory of us is the same, although maybe different feelings. But I think when you're saying something about, it's a stupid way to look at your first book, that I didn't do this or I didn't do that, or I wasn't writing, I wasn't doing so much in the meter. I
Mm.
don't think it's a stupid way, because I think that's very natural way. You get to reflect on what you've done, and what, maybe for us, what could improve. Because for me, I did remember, I do remember doing that. Although in my head, I was telling myself, "Oh, I'm just being my own reflective practitioner," especially in healthcare, when we're when we basically in healthcare, when you're a registered nurse or a registered psychotherapist, you get to revalidate, and you get to renew your license, basically. And one thing that I learned is, and that was taught to us, you have to be your own reflective practitioner. You have to write all these reflective essays about what you've done right, what you've done wrong in your practice. So I found myself doing that a lot during the pandemic, while I was reading from my book. And like you, I was obsessively reading so much. I guess it's also because of the time, and the time just slowed down. And then I found myself, oh yeah, I could have done this, or next time I'll try doing this, I'll try doing that. When you mentioned that your second book almost came out from a point of shame, I guess for me, I'm sure there's some tinge of like shame for myself as well, that, oh, how come my book is so is so quiet, like, well, I felt it's quiet, but other people might say the same,
Maybe.
a different thing. But for me, my second book, almost came from a point of like, oh, I really want to challenge myself. Like, almost like I was this bitter person that, oh, if people can't see that I can be a poet, I'm gonna challenge myself and I'm gonna prove to myself, I'm gonna prove to others that I can, that I will remain in this in this landscape. And I remember like at one point between 2020, 2021, I was like, there were days when I was, when you have this feeling that, oh, I can do this, I can write, and I can see other people doing this technique and I can try it as well. And there was a moment when I was just like crying and I was almost like self-pitying that, oh, no matter what I did in the past, nobody could see it. So what's the point of doing it now? But I think it does definitely come, it did definitely come from a point of maybe a mixture of that, um,
Mhm.
shyness, that, oh, why not, but also challenge. I think I remember clearly though that, and I realized that while some may not be able to see or may not be able to look at your work the way you look at your work or the way you hope them to look at your work, there are also moments that will tell you almost that you're on the right path. And I remember talking again to Surya about, oh, I think Lord is really telling me, I'm Catholic by background, but Surya is a Buddhist, so there's a lot of like spirituality going around. And at one point, I'm like thinking, I think Lord is really telling me that I'm I need to write, because then, but by 2021, that's when I had my Jerwood Compton fellowship, and I thought, oh my God, like people are important, people and important organizations can see me. So in at one point in my in the past, I thought, oh, they can't see me, I'm not good enough. But then there came a time when, oh, this organization noticed me, and they see my worth. So I guess that kept me going in a sense.
That's interesting. Because yeah, I was just thinking. So the title of this event was sustaining the
Mm.
the spark,
Sustaining the spark.
and I had a question which which I was something that was on my mind a lot after I published, which was, which was why do you write? Um, and that was something I thought about a lot after publishing the first book, because like I guess coming back to what I said before, I realized that it wasn't to publish. I thought,
Hmm.
and I would never have described it myself as writing to publish, but somehow the process of publishing really reinforced that could never, that could and should never be the purpose of it in itself. But then the process of publishing had weirdly taken away my my answer to that question.
Hmm.
And I had to, yeah, I feel like I'm still in a process of really, of trying to answer that. And also it feels important because no one tells you that when you're allowed to publish one thing, that doesn't mean you'll be allowed to publish anything else. You know,
Hmm.
it's sort of a one-time deal each time, each time.
Yeah.
Um, and you don't enter this special club. It's not a job, essentially, in that sense. Like writing is just not a job, in the sense that you can't suddenly start collecting the writer's salary as soon as you publish. So you're constantly faced with that question, and it just becomes more pressing. Why do you write? Why do you do it? Why do
Hmm.
you write? Yeah.
And while you are reflecting on that answer, why do we write? Why do I write? How do you sustain curiosity and how do you sustain your creative energy? Because when we look at Will Harris, and I'm sure that when people also look at other poets. They only see the work, isn't it? 2020 publish, and then you got your second collection, and then you're working on something else. But deep down or in the background, we ask ourselves why do we write? So how can we sustain our curiosity while we are trying to find out the reason why we write?
Mm. Um, I I don't know. Like I said, I'm not really writing many poems at the moment, but I think one way of keeping curious has been to be okay with that and to give myself uh, permission to just to do to read whatever I want, to do whatever I want, to
Mm.
to take different paths. And I think I know on some level that writing, that words will always be how I make sense of my experience. I need to process things through language and but I think yeah, maybe the overall point of everything I'm saying is that you maybe are trying to resist reducing that to a commodity form, to an object for as long as possible is how you stay curious.
Mm.
Just being open. I'm like, oh, just being, yeah. I mean, that seems obvious, but yeah, just being really open. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, you said it seems obvious, but it's so hard to do sometimes, isn't it? Because sometimes when we write, a part of it as well. I know it's a commodity, but a part of it also, kind of like for me, a part of me also needs that push to know that actually it's that I'm still a part of me still wants to be published.
Mm,
And even though the reason for why I write is eventually for connection,
mm,
a lot of this is like you to make sense of my own thoughts, my own experiences, but also to connect. Um, Publishing also helps me connect with the wider readership or with the wider world. Sometimes it's hard because, especially when we talk about recognition or prices, poetry prices and things like that, sometimes it's so easy to focus on recognition, prices, and not actually pricing our own work and pricing our own poems. And I think that's what I am teaching myself to do. I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like I've grown a little bit since 2020, and I'm not really focused on like any prizes. Of course, it's nice to be shortlisted, but it's not my main focus anymore. My main focus is that connection. Like I know that if I just make this and if I just write this somewhere in the world, someone in the world will come to me, and maybe not even come to me, but will appreciate it in whatever way they will appreciate it. Obviously, initially, that sense of connection only for me only existed within my immediate family. Like I started writing poems for my friends, for my family, and I used to write poems as a way of getting the attention of my crush. So those kind of connection. But as I grew older and as my poems get published, it's nice to know that it moves someone or it inspired someone. And in a way, it's hard because you know that it needs to be published in order for it to reach to someone that I don't know. Um, so for me, I'm still learning to balance that personal, um, personal
mm.
reason and the publishing, the importance of publishing to a certain extent.
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, yeah, making meeting people, making friendships through publishing. Also, the relationships you have. in the process of it, like with your editor or, you know,
Mm.
the copy editor or the, all these people, they become part of the collaborative process. And that can be really, really brilliant. I found those relationships really rewarding. Um, and that process of shaping the book that happens, and I'm really grateful for that. And recently I also discovered that if you're working on a book, you can do this thing, which is just you can get in touch with people online, just strangers. Like, well, particularly because I've been writing a nonfiction book, I've been reaching out to um, just people whose work I find interesting in different fields, and that's another thing you can do. And you can do that as a poet as well, obviously. Like I just reach out to other poets or yeah. Um,
Yes.
and the idea that we're all in this shared quest is is nice.
Mm. Yeah, and I think I really hear you when you say give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to do anything really. And when you say reach out, as in reach out not only to poets or to fellow writers, but also to different sectors, sometimes it's hard, isn't it? Because I don't know about you, but I still feel shy sometimes just reaching out
Mm.
to someone. But it's nice to just be reminded that it's okay to reach out and it's okay to get out of the your normal field and of course the connections. And I'm
Yeah.
just looking at the time wheel, and
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
would like I'd like to
Yes, so
invite
do I.
people
I would
to,
like to hear.
if you have any question, please feel free to raise your hand or maybe put them in the chat box if you have any question to Will or myself. We will finish with one more poem, but before before we finish, I have one more question to you, Will. Do you think that who you are now as a writer is different from who you were when you were a debut? And if there's any advice, or maybe not advice, but like just anything that you could tell your old debutante self, what would it be?
Um, yeah, it's such a difficult question. I always feel like the writing of my own writing that I'm happiest with is either in the past
Mm,
or, in the future. And it's actually, yeah, so and actually at this moment, because I'm not writing a lot, when I read the poems of my debut self, I feel like that you can only do the best you can do at the time at which you're working. Um, and actually, I mean, I think that's all you really need to know. You can't, because the world changes anyway. You can never, and you're in a you're in a responsive, dynamic relationship to your surroundings, to the writing traditions that you're a part of. They're always moving and shifting. So yeah, I don't know. My only advice would probably be more like psychological, just be more like well-being related. Just be like
mm,
relax and yeah, feel maybe just try and feel more connected to what you're doing. Yeah.
mm.
What about
I
you?
think it's very important. It, I think the writing process, the publishing, from what we've talked about, clearly it can be anxiety provoking. There's a lot of pressure from not only from the publishing world, not only from the public, but also most importantly from our own selves as writers. And I think when you said relax, it's so true.
Mm.
poets poets really need to, or writers really need to relax because it's so hard, isn't it? I mean,
Mm.
my work within the NHS is a lot about psychological health, and I found that as a writer I have become more anxious and more always ruminating and overthinking, and sometimes I could only see things in black and white. It's either or if I don't have it, I it means this thing, or if I have this it means that thing. And I guess it's a process that also, or it's a journey that also continually, we need to continually kind of hone it as much as we hone our writing writing skills. I think we also need to hone our self-care skills, because it's quite difficult. And obviously we all have our friends, writing friends and editors and people who support us, but ultimately writing is a solitary practice, and living as a writer can be very solitary. So I guess, yeah, I mean, I know that I'm completely a different, not completely, but I have become a different person from before. Like I said in the past, when I was a debutante, I was always looking for, oh, a prize. And that probably because I came from prizes. And
Mm.
now I feel like as long as it reached someone somewhere, I'm happy.
Mm.
um, but yeah, so to end, uh, everyone, if you have any question, please let us know. You can speak up or you can type it in the chat box. But as we are waiting for a question, maybe,
Or comments,
yeah, or comments, any feedback, if you
just
feel like,
on people's own experiences of this.
yeah, definitely. Especially I can see like familiar names in the chat box. But before we end, maybe, and while we're waiting for comments, feedbacks, and question, maybe we can end with a poem that maybe we don't appreciate so much before, but kind of like appreciate now, and maybe why. And I'll start, Will, so that I can give you some
Yeah.
time to look through your book. So I'll start with a poem. I'm gonna go for a poem called, I don't even know the title of my own poem, but it's something to do about, yeah, balikbayan box and notes inside a balikbayan box. And I say this because when I was writing it, I really want it to be so clear, and so almost like I want the theme and the message and the language to be so clear, as if you're just writing to someone and you're just putting it in a balikbayan box, which is a box we send back to the Philippines full of gifts for our loved ones. So this box is, it's a big box, and it takes years, maybe a year to fill it, because you can't buy gifts, a lot of gifts at one time. So Filipinos usually fill their balikbayan boxes slowly. Maybe they will allot a little bit of money every time, every month, at the end of the month when they get their salary, buy some gifts until the box is full, and then they send it back to the Philippines. And I remember when I when we included this in the book, I thought, oh my god, this is so dramatic, and this is so, like, this is not very poetic, in a way that this is too much, like this is too much drama. I could make a soap opera out of this poem. And at one point I was thinking, if other poets read this, they were like, you're so dramatic. But now that I'm going back to it, I felt like this is one of those poems that really touch the, I would say, the regular readers, or like the public. And every time I'll receive an email, they'll say, "Oh, this is the Blake Beinbach's poem." So that's why I eventually became proud of it. And I think it made me realize the two perspectives that I was coming from. Like before, I was always, maybe I was only looking for recognition from whom I think were like the critics and like the poetry people. Whereas now I really appreciate normal readers, readers who came from non literary backgrounds, like myself, readers from the public. So I'll read it, and then you can read your poem. Yeah. Notes inside a balikbayan box. Dear son, in my place, Here is a balikbayan box. Here are the LeBron James rubber shoes, size 9, and the video game tapes to replace all the palm cakes I owe you for every simbang gabi and PTA meeting I could not attend. I promise I'll be there for Christmas. I know I've been saying this for a decade now. Find the E45 cream for your grandma's tissue dry skin, a stack of incontinence pads and tubes of barrier balm. Between you and me, every time I roll old people onto their sides and lift their knees to their chest for suppositories, I ask myself, who does this for her? Tell Tita to leave her husband, her school sweetheart whose mistresses are Mahjong and Sabong. Tell her not to bear the stink of his armpits. In the box, find the Gucci Bloom perfume and Scar creams. Tell her I haven't forgotten our vows when we were young and our fingers smelled of lihing me candies. Our walang iwanan oath to never leave each other. Dear son, in my place, here is a balikbayan box. Rip all the packaging tape. Every gift inside is yours. Work your hands hard until there's nothing left. Learn that to survive, we must have strong arms. To carry a tray full of medicine and not let one drop. To push a hyperventilating woman with speed and care to the maternity wing. To lift and sit a skin and bone man down on his chemo chair. To gauge the weight of a rose before you lay it onto a coffin. Take this box inside your house. That is all I ask you to carry for now, my son. And of course, Will, would you treat us to a poem from your debut that you get to love over time?
Um, okay. I will try. I will try and read something that I I've got to. Don't know. I want to read something that's short. And actually, the poems I like the most are probably quite long. But I'm going to read a short one, um, which I like. I think just because it's quite simple, and I like that I did that. I just let myself write something very simple. It's called The Hanged Man, which is one of the uh, yeah, it's a tarot card image
Mm.
that was based based on. Uh, he bought a seeded loaf and two ripe and ready avocados and left them in the hallway. And at lunch the next day went to Chipotle on Charing Cross Road, then back to work. And afterwards bought a ring donut from Tesco because there were no jam donuts. That night, though he didn't think he was a hoarder, he started ordering records online. And soon he had bought the whole of Bruce Springsteen's back catalogue. I hate Bruce Springsteen, he thought. I want to eat better. The next week, listening to Human Touch, he dozed and woke to find himself floating 2 feet off the ground, hanging there. His parents were alive and dead. If only he could keep completely still, he could remain unscattered, forever on the edge of rain.
Thank you. If only he could keep completely still, he could remain unscattered. How lovely. And
Mm.
I think that really summarizes what we're trying to say tonight.
We're all trying to do, yeah.
If only we could keep completely still, we
It's
could remain unscattered. And I think there's a lot of
it's
audience.
true.
Thank you, audience, for telling us your feedback, your comment. Wonderfully rich conversation. Thank you. And of
Yeah.
course, these experiences are relatable. Isabel said, and Karen mentioned that sometimes it's important to allow yourself space to just be, and that creates space for rekindling of inspiration. Definitely, definitely. Thank you so much for watching. And Will, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you sharing the space with me. and opening your heart and being very honest with your experiences. I know that this has inspired people, and this has really given them permission to also do the same, to be kind and to relax as a poet. So thank you so much.
Oh no, it's been so nice. Yeah, yeah, really nice to chat to you, and yeah, and great to have everyone here remotely. Sorry not to be able to see everyone. Yeah.
Th- Thank you, Will, and thank you, everyone. Again, it's fascinating to see how our early work can continue to surprise and fuel our ongoing creativity. We really hope that this conversation has inspired you to revisit your own writing, to become your own reflective practitioner, and to dive into your work with fresh eyes and fresh hope. Again, thank you so much. You will see us again, and you will see this recording once it's available on our YouTube channel. For now, have a good night, everyone. Thank you. And thank you, Will. Please give
Thank you,
a
Rona.
hand, like some clap for Will. Thank you, Will. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye,
See you
everyone.
Monday. Bye, everyone.